Debra B. Wilson. It is Saturday, the 11th of August, 2018. The time is 600 hours and 51 minutes, and that's GMT, and I'm in the UK. This is going to be one of my stream of consciousness videos, podcasts, in which I'm literally remembering things as I understand them, as I remember them, as I recall how I believed I experienced them. And it's about three entities. And I'm taking them in chronological order. So it will be, the first entity would be what was the Irish Republican Army in Dundalk. And then the next one would be what was then called Special Branch in London, England. And then the third one would be the Shabak, which is Israel's internal intelligence agency. All right, so I'm going to start. What's similar? I was thinking about that. I've been thinking about it for actually several years now. What's similar about, I've interacted and bumped up against all three entities in living my life or my activism. The latter two, the British and the Israelis, it's around my activism. What was the IRA was around living my life. I moved to Ireland and lived in Dublin, County Dublin for a while, and then I moved on to Dundalk because of an engagement, and that was in County Louth. In any case, all three of these entities, I think it's fair to say, I think it's accurate to say that they're militarized identities. And again, the provisional IRA no longer exists. So, but I'm going to speak of all of them in the present tense. I think it's fair to say of all three identities, they are militarized. I also think it's fair to say that they are male constructs of security and engagement with the world, and however they define security and however they define the world in which they operate in. I think that's fair to say, particularly the context and the time I'm talking about. Okay. So, and I'm going to do an abbreviated bit because I'm doing this stream of consciousness with some overarching themes without going into terribly too much detail. But my interaction with the IRA and some other paramilitary groups in the area became problematic for me because I lived in a community in which it was the tail end of the Troubles in late 1990s, and wars are messy in the way they end, and there is a hyper emphasis on who's us and who's them, and looking at identities. Some people in the paramilitary groups in that area, not just the IRA, questioned who I was. They thought I was MI5. And the reason why they thought I was MI5 is because, for two reasons. First of all, my accent was completely muddled. I'm from America, and middle America, Chicago, and so I have that accent. I come from two highly intelligent people, and the more intellectual exposure you have, that impacts your accent. I think that might not be politically correct to say, but I think it's accurate. And in addition, both my parents came from the South, so I had southern traces of my accent from America. And then I'd spent, by the time I went to Dundalk, I had spent more than a decade going back and forth to London, England, and at times living in London. So some of my word choices were quite British indeed, and London had been influenced by that. And then I picked up very quickly, apparently, you don't hear your accent changing, but my accent, I picked up influences from both Dublin and Dundalk very quickly. And a comment that was, when I asked why, and I mean, it was a serious matter, but why in the closest friends tend to be white, male, and performance of hypermasculinity. Well, so I developed all these platonic friendships that I go out walking with, I go to the pubs with them, and I drink in order to crush, and they have an alcoholic beverage. And so I began hanging out with people literally. You won't believe it, but whatever. Again, so because the curiosity about me and who I was because I was hanging out with these hyper-masculine male personalities, that some of them were in the paramilitary groups. I came to find out after I left, and I wasn't being the girl with them, quote unquote. I was like one of the boys, quote unquote. So they attributed that to the fact that I was a trained MI5 operative, which was not true. So their understanding of gender roles, ethnicity, my ethnicity being Black American, and how did she fit in with the boys, hanging out with the boys. Okay? So I did say this is going to be brief. I'm just trying to tie this together. So next comes, I returned to Chicago. Metaphorically speaking, although it's not that simple, I sort of brushed myself off from what was a very complex situation that involved loads of men and women saving my life in Dundalk, and I don't want to minimize that, but I'm trying to stay on point in this podcast. So then I go to London, and my personality, I'm the daughter of two people from Mississippi who migrated to the up north for a better life. And so the whole ethos of people from the South, particularly the Black Americans who did that, is just do it. You just effing do it, right? So I sort of, again, it's much more complex than this, but for the outwardly appearance, I dusted myself off, had a good cry and horror about what might have happened in Dundalk, and I went back to my activism in the UK. So now enters the special. They saw my reaction and immediately thought I worked for an American government agency. So that was because I went back to my work, and my work is being an activist in London, England. So I just sort of went back to my work. By the way, there were people that I was and still am friends with who are part of the Good Friday Agreement out of Dundalk. They were equally as shocked. But they had moved past what they perceived that I was the government, the British government person. So now I'm dealing with British government people, another militarized identity. This one's British for the state. It's a state identity. And they became suspicious that, how did this Black American civilian, first of all, how did she get herself in that situation in Dundalk? And then exactly how I was extricated from that situation, right? It involved some complex personalities, some women, mostly men. So then there was the question, okay, well, now she's back here. And she's just going back to her activism. So then there were some questions about my identity and who I must really be, because I'm able to do these things. So, how she able to pick herself back up and do this so quickly. So there's that. And at one point over the years, I had engagement with special branch for donkeys leaders, right? So it was many, many years. At one point, as a special branch officer, when I came into the UK, at the port of entry for me was Heathrow Airport, and he started asking about my nationality. Well, hey, I'm immediately thinking this man is thinking I'm trying to say I'm traveling on a false passport, and I remember saying, I'm an American. This is this passport this is an authentic passport. And he said, I'm not asking you that. He was asking me my nationality. So he kept with all these questions about my nationality, and I kept saying I'm an American, and I didn't understand what he was trying to say. And then he said, with this quite British accent that I won't imitate because I don't embarrass myself, he said, what about your parents? Where are they from? And I remember saying to him, they're from Mississippi, keeps going back in my familiar lineage, about my nationality. And I remember I said at one point, which is where the conversation stopped, because he snapped at me again, but I said if we keep going back, we're going to end up on a slave ship. And so that's pretty much when the interview stopped. So anyway, I was stamped, got my passport stamped, and was admitted into the country, and I mentioned it to the experienced system feminist activists. I didn't know what in the world that was. That's what I kept thinking. He thinks I'm traveling on a false passport. But then they don't let you in. Hello, it's a false passport. Come on in, honey. They don't do that. So I couldn't understand the whole thing. And so I mentioned it to some British feminists all British nationals that I worked with, and they started giving each other the side eye look. And I asked, what? Okay, what is it? Well, and I won't imitate their accent. I won't do that either. And they said, well, he probably thought you weren't American, with all the traveling you're doing, and how you seem to have immersed yourself in London activism community. So we actually surprised you're American as well. Okay, so now I've interjected civil society, but I'm going to stay focused on these militarized identities. So after they said that, I went back and replayed in my head the conversation with them, and if taking their proposition of what they thought, the supposition of what they thought he was thinking, it made sense. Okay, so with that case, I was a Black American woman, and however you construct that identity as the special branch, I had stepped out of that identity for them. So now the third one is the Shabak. I'd never been to Israel. I've been critical of some functionality of engagement in the relationships between the Israelis and the Palestinians, with the Israelis being the more powerful one. So we all have responsibility in the relationships in which we engage, but I always look at the power. So when I started being approached by people who told me they were Israelis, I didn't know what I thought about a lot of things. Okay, I'm a very measured person, and I always understand the dynamic. I always seek to understand. I apologize. That's presumptuous and arrogant. I always seek to understand and acknowledge there are multiple dynamics in a relationship. So I'm always seeking, whenever I look at the relationship, and they are a relationship between the Israelis and the Palestinians, all the dynamics that come into play. I try to continually search for them. I still didn't understand why I was all of a sudden meeting lots of Israelis in London, England. And then in Chicago, my circle of friends in Chicago were, the closest friends have typically been, the vast majority of them, overwhelmingly, these hyper-performing, outward-looking, alpha male personalities, and a high percentage of them were Jewish men, Jewish American. And that didn't change, although they were not all Jewish American. They were, my closest friends overwhelmingly have always been white men, right? So that's my reality. But I started meeting more Jewish American people who were, let's say, more aligned with Likud party than not, okay? And very, very militarized. There's a lot of discussions about the IDF. I was invited to a fundraiser in Chicago for the IDF. That had never happened before, and there was just a lot of curious things. And I remember some of these new Jewish men who came into my life constantly asking me about being Muslim, my Muslimness, and you don't seem to be a Muslim. What kind of Muslim are you? And sometimes when I'd be in a circle with all my guy friends, we could discuss politics on Friday evenings after we got off work. Some of us were retired, most of us were working in this circle, and we discussed politics. And I remember one day a new man to the group, one of the new people to the group, it was me, and the rest of them were white Jewish men, started asking, what kind of Muslim are you? And it was curious. And so questions about how I experienced my religiosity choose to bring near to you and dear. And so there was all this question about the fact that from these Jewish people now, these new Jewish people in my life, about how I experienced Islam, how I experienced my identity. The interesting part about the people that I think may have been connected with the Shabak is that it was a direct question about how I constructed my identity itself. Because when they looked around, I didn't have any Muslim friends at that time. I didn't actually have, my closest friends were all from Hyde Park or experienced Hyde Park, and all had parents or themselves that had experience of the civil rights movement. So that's what binded us together. And there were other things that I felt very comfortable with. So there was a lot of questions about who you are and why you are. And some of those people, I think, because nobody's going to tell you that, but I suspect had something to do with Israeli intelligence, the Shabak. Then when I went to Israel in 2017, nobody comes out and says directly who you are, but it was a very stressful and emotional time for me. I can't overemphasize that enough. And I guess there are ways of making yourself known without waving a flag, saying hello, okay? And so it was interesting in Israel, to be in Israel, to come into contact overtly, and I believe in ways covertly, Israeli intelligence, and how they constructed my identity, and what that meant to them about their way, and how that influenced how they engaged with me. Years ago, I did say this was a stream of consciousness, so I'm almost done, bear with me. Years ago, I was doing some volunteer work at a library in London, England, and I was learning all about British intelligence, and this is decades ago. I'm in my 30s, sorry. I was in my early 30s then, and I'm in my 60s now. So, okay, to anchor this in a time period. And so there was no social media, certainly not where it is now. And as she brought up, this woman was talking to me about the spying apparatuses, because some of the women were being questioned because of their activism. And she was commenting about the approach the intelligence community in the UK, context UK, were using with these women. Well, first of all, I didn't even know who she was talking about. And so she explained the different agencies as they were back in the day. And then she went on to tell me what she thought, how she described spies. And the way she described them was militarized sociologists. Or were they, she said, she found the militarization problematic, but at their best, they should be sociologists. So see, that's just how I'm bringing this all around, okay? So I look at these three distinct experiences. Okay, what was the IRA? What was then called Special Branch, or we did, the circuit I was traveling with, and what is called the Shabak. And I think to myself, how these militarized identities, they are all militarized identities, how they looked at the world, how they experienced the world, and how that experience influenced the way they engaged with not just other state actors or other paramilitary actors, but civilians and individuals. And some of the stuff has been really frightening, but it has, if the moments, even when I look back in horror and go, oh my God, that almost happened to me, I look back with an intellectual curiosity about these militarized, overwhelmingly speaking, well, they've all mostly been white, okay, and one knows that's truthful. They've been militarized, that's truthful as well, and they've been overwhelmingly male, or the model in which the people operate out of have been constructed male understandings, quote-unquote reality, quote-unquote, of who and what identity asking to do this, it has stepped out of some constructed identities and ways in which they have constructed it. It's dependent on many things, including the societies in which they're born and the time in which they're born. Yeah, so that's what I woke up this morning thinking about. So on that note, because I'm already past